Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation, and I really apologize that I will speak English, even though I was actually on the Expertenbeirat of the Klimafonds for many years. Then I have never suspected that I would ever be living in Austria, but that's life. Central European University moved to Vienna, so now I just started my life in Austria, and my German is not very good, even though I have a German citizenship. But anyway, so today, what I want to talk to you about is the need for climate action with an international perspective and sustainable real estate and urban development. And of course, because I'm coming from the climate background, I cannot resist, unfortunately, starting with a really disappointing and very scary climate data that we are seeing this summer, and many of which are just literally going off the map and off the scale. This is, for example, just the temperature of the North Atlantic Ocean, and of course you can think that who cares, it's far away, but we know that our climate, our weather is very significantly determined by this. But if we go quite to the other end of the planet and go south, this is the Antarctic ice has really not frozen back and to anything before, and it's also, this figure is really going off the map. All climate scientists are just bracing and looking, but they have really been even more scared when they looked at, and I'm sure it was also in the Austrian news, when we saw the average air temperature of the summer months, June, July, August, which was a startling 0.4 degrees, 0.4 of a degree warmer than any time before. And this is summer for us, but it was winter in the southern hemisphere, so it really should not necessarily have happened. And we hardly so we kind of start to realize that even though we think it was the hottest summer of our lives, it actually may have been one of the coolest summers of our life. And I will come back to this soon when we talk about sustainable real estate concepts. But yes, the story didn't finish this summer. Unfortunately, this doesn't work so well. The pointer, for some reason, maybe I point this way. Yeah, you can see this way, yes. So this is the 3 summer months, and we thought this was already terribly much off the scale of whatever has happened before. And then September was even hotter than that. So then even the climate scientists, and I don't know if you know these words in English, but even the climate scientists who see these records every day, they use these words to describe how much September was warmer than ever before. And there is no end. We see that already October temperatures, and I don't know I didn't bring the October ones, but October is already starting to be even potentially hotter. And while we enjoy this now, right, all of you are thinking, yeah, but isn't that nice to have a little Indian summer, right? Well, I certainly enjoyed it, especially that we have just moved here and we still don't have heating. So I was really scared that if the cold comes in, we won't have heating. But anyway, the problem is that in the long run, this is not going to be working. So let's now look at actually what the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the ultimate body for climate science assessment, what does it say in the latest report about the role of the real estate sector? What can you do and what are the opportunities? And there is just, after all the bad news on climate, the really great news is that in fact, here in Europe, the solution is really in your hands. And it's not a responsibility, but really an opportunity. Why? We very rarely look at this figure. We really rarely look at this, that half of all European final energy is used for heating. We always talk about coal, gas, whatever. Half of all European final energy is used for heating. And we know that actually the vast majority of this we don't need, and we can provide the same service or even better service. And in fact, the world actually learned this from Austria. So it will be very strange that I have toured with some of my figures the entire world from Japan to South Africa, all around the world. And now for the first time, I will show them to Austria because it's about Austria. But before we go there, let's also come back to some of the already, unfortunately my German is not very good, but what I understood, you also talked about, I think, embodied energy, embodied carbon, so not only the operation energy. And this looks like a little bit complex figure, but what this shows is that this is how much carbon is already embodied in the infrastructure that we have, urban infrastructure. This is in the developed world. This is how much it is in the developing world. Now, the developing world still has to build up a lot of their infrastructure, so that if they build up to our level and do nothing else, just to our level, then this is going to take 100 gigatons more carbon. And also, if we just count how much more infrastructure we will need for those who are not yet urbanized, that's going to be another 117. To add that up, that means the over 200 gigatons. That means that over half of our remaining carbon budget will be used up by nothing else, just building up the remaining urban infrastructure. And we have not turned even a light switch on. So that means it's a tremendous liability, but also a tremendous opportunity. Unfortunately for us who are in this part of the world, it's more a liability than opportunity, because we will need to give them the development space that they can still develop their cities and urban infrastructure and infrastructure in a way that they can also live to standards that close to ours. Before I go to the solutions, just let me raise a few alarm bells. So, yes, by today, where also is really the real estate sector is really important. By 2020, we have more man-made material on the planet than all of the living material on the planet. And while you're in the real estate sector, I'm sure you're thinking, so what's wrong with that, right? So it's great, you know, lots of beautiful buildings, so that's nothing wrong. Well, there is a lot of wrong. The problem is that much of this material is, we are slowly seeing how much toxic it has on our lives. And it's really just the last couple of years that we are understanding the impacts. And if I go back to this, at the same time, just since the turn of the millennia, this amount of man-made materials has more than tripled in the last, and it's exponential. It's really increasing now towards the end and in the last couple of years. And I can assure you that the companies who know that they have to get out of oil, one area they are really running into is plastics. There is tremendous investments in plastic generation capacities by the oil industry, and they will want to sell that plastic. So plastic we already see everywhere, but it is going to be even more, and definitely in the construction sector, you're going to see more and more use of, and wonderful use of, the plastic. But then what do we see? First, the alarm bell was rung that the babies, when they are bottle fed, they are swallowing millions of microplastic pieces with each swallow of formula. But very soon we realized that it is even in the breast milk. So even babies who are breastfed are not immune to not getting a huge load of microplastics already in their first few weeks of their lives. But then so we also understood that actually already it's in the placenta. So a baby even cannot be born innocent and clean into this world, but already full loads of microplastics. And we know the impacts, and I don't want to dwell on this very long, but for example, we know that male fertility has declined by 1/2 just in a few decades, and it was actually an Austrian study just a year ago which showed that plastic is already in our even in our brain. And this last study last week showed that it's even in the clouds. So it's all over, and we know the impacts because yes, this is the breast milk and the cloud study. But we know that these all actually have health effects, and it's not only plastics, but all the chemicals. A lot of the chemicals we are using. I don't know how many of you heard of PFAS. those chemicals which we use a lot in fireproofing, waterproofing, a lot of our shoes, I'm sure, using Gore-Tex, or our jackets out, or in the morning when we fried our fried egg, it was in Teflon. This is also PFAS. The problem with both microplastic, PFAS, and a lot of the materials in the construction industry, that they don't decay, because we want them to be stable. But then if they don't decay, that means they just accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, and there is more and more. And by today, we are at the level that you cannot even go to Antarctica and even the snow in Antarctica is not safe drinking water levels. So nowhere in the world rain meets drinking water standards. They are all poisoned by PFAS and microplastics, and all of this is just accumulating. And however optimistic we are, there is no way we can just clean up the entire planet from PFAS and microplastics and all the other different chemicals. And we know it's going a lot of toxic. These are very toxic, and I don't have time. I don't want to get into that. So the situation is very dire, both in climate and chemical pollution. And I didn't even touch biodiversity loss and so on. But the good news is, again, that really a lot of the solutions are in your hands. And it's no mistake that the Working Group 3 report of the IPCC a year and a half ago, on the cover, it is a building. And not a big, fancy, it's just very simple. It's a little zero-energy building, very livable, actually self-built. It's a social housing project in Ireland, no, Scotland, sorry. And the point is that it's just a very simple thing, but it's zero energy, and it just really shows that there is a lot of well-being and a lot of health around. So yes, the real estate sector is crucial for both a net zero and a healthy future. So let's actually go through that. Which are the points that we have covered, or which we have highlighted in the Working Group 3 report, the mitigation report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So first of all, we stated that net zero energy, not carbon, net zero energy buildings are feasible in all climates and economic for almost all building types, definitely everything in Europe. So the only place where it's a bit more difficult is hot, humid climates, especially high-rise commercial buildings, and I will come back to that. And the key to this is not putting more and more solar energy. That's also important. Fortunately, we are doing that. But the key to this is minimized energy and material demand, which was also already mentioned before me. But I think for you, perhaps this point is really important, and I will come back to that. This requires net zero energy retrofit and repurposing of existing building stocks and repair of components rather than new and replacement wherever applicable. And this must be really hard. I will come back to this. Let's first go through the points, and then I'm going to come back to them, each of them. And this requires durable, long-life buildings and components with warranties and accessible repair services. So because whenever we construct anything new, that actually cancels everything, all your other efforts to make a green building. So you can have the most green building certificate of the planet, but as compared to what a normal building is, you still didn't save as much energy or even emissions as if you have rather done a retrofit rather than a new building. And durability is really crucial. And certainly, as was already mentioned, changing from emissions-intensive materials to more bio-based materials, which fortunately in Austria you are very blessed with, and you are again showing the planet that you can do a lot of this high-rise buildings with timber framing and so on. But also maximizing the use of bio-based materials is not only just for the emission savings, but also actually the longer you use those materials, bio-based materials, the longer you are taking out the carbon of the atmospheric circulation. So actually you're sequestering carbon, even if not forever, but still it is out of the carbon cycle. And also, yes, we do need to bring back biodiversity into the cities. That means we do need to have the micro ecosystems integrated into the urban fabric and into the building fabric as well. So let's actually come back to some of these points in more detail. So first of all, yes, net zero energy buildings are feasible in all climates. And again, you showed it in Austria, and I'm going to show the example soon. But then let's come to the more difficult point. And I risk that I will never be invited again for any real estate conference, but I have to say this. By today, in Europe, we should not build new buildings anymore. We have enough buildings in Europe. What we need to do, we need to repurpose, retrofit, and make the best use of what we have. Why? The first reason is because anytime, as I mentioned, the construction of the new building takes enormous amount of emissions and carbon, and that's why I showed that huge liability figure with half of all our remaining carbon budget just for construction. And there was nothing in this for the developed world. That's first. Second, we need to have somehow enough. We can't go just on and on with having bigger buildings and bigger buildings and bigger buildings, or bigger apartments and bigger apartments. That, of course, does not apply for those who are still in need. But the problem is simply we are facing a major crisis, a major climate crisis. Yes, technologies have been great, and we have been doing a lot, and renewable energy is developing much faster than ever before, much faster than anyone ever projected. Still, emissions are going up and up and up and up. So the only way we can try to hold them is if technology goes hand in hand with some level of sufficiency, that at some level we just say, perhaps that's enough. In buildings, definitely, because it's not only the embodied energy, but also demolition. Anytime we pull down the building, that has also enormous, not only emissions, but enormous amount of waste and toxic impact on the world and on the environment. So this was the paper in which we reviewed, and together actually with the industry, so that was really nice, from all around the world, the evidence also from the construction industry, and showed that actually net zero buildings are feasible anywhere. So we have no excuse, no one has an excuse not building or even retrofitting to net zero, because the evidence also shows that it's even cost effective, and actually these are the slides that I mentioned that I have been touring the world with, and I'm sure you recognize these very well. And where I demonstrated that to the world that yes, this is possible. And I know you showed the word, but I was so surprised that there is not much more of this in Austria still. If you know how to do this cost effectively, then why don't we do every retrofit this way? So this is the technical university, but it looks like a building. We're in a real estate conference, but it's a power plant. It's the power plant of the 21st century, because it typically produces more energy on an annual basis than it consumes. So I have to admit that actually I make the biggest scientific mistake of my life actually with this, because before I met the people who actually designed this and from whom I heard about this, I published, and we did a big study that we looked at where zero energy buildings are possible and where not. And we said that in Central Europe, high-rise office buildings or commercial buildings are definitely no way zero energy building. Now, fortunately, you don't read scientific literature that much, at least not mine, fortunately. So that means that some people are crazy enough to still try what the scientists say this is not possible. So here it is. So to my excuse, it wasn't that totally stupid for me to say that, because we know that before renovation, this building was about 800 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. At that time, the typical new office building was about 450 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. And even with the best technology at that time, you could produce maybe 60 kilowatt hours per square meter per year on-site renewable energy. So yes, 450 is still much larger than 61. So from that perspective, I was right. But Then there are, as I said, fortunately more crazy people than I am. So they looked at, okay, well, let's still look at that 458. What can we do? Can we still perhaps reduce that? And my colleagues always say, the big modelers, yeah, just give me the technology what did it, and we will model it for the world. I'm sorry, it's not one technology. It's 9,300 components optimized. But it's not rocket science. It's not big deal technologies. It's nothing expensive. It's actually just a lot of good thinking. Okay, what could we do? What could we do with coffee machines? What could we do with the dishwashers? What could we do with the elevators? And it turned out, for example, that it's the security systems, for example, that used quite a lot of energy because nobody procures a security system by looking at its energy efficiency. So when after they managed to optimize 9,300 components, it went down to 56, and immediately 56 was less than 61, so suddenly it was possible to have a net or an energy plus building, actually. So, and we proved that also for the Otto Wagner area, and I'm very proud of that. We were supposed to be moving my university to the Otto Wagner area, and that would have been a wonderful story. So, and we got also a research grant from the Austrian ministry. And what we did, we also looked at if that beautiful Art Nouveau, the biggest Art Nouveau historic district of the world could be converted into an energy plus district. And we showed that yes, it can be, even if you, we worked very closely with Dagmar Schutz. So even if you observe the strictest national monument protection criteria, you can still do it. And but also there, again, the trick is really the energy efficiency. So our research started with really understanding everybody's behavior when you come to work, what kind of computer you use, how many hours you use a day, and so on and so on. And after optimizing all of this, it's possible. And in fact, the interesting thing was that we also showed, now unfortunately a lot of things changed, so the numbers are not this anymore. But when we finished the study, it looked that actually the costs of an energy plus retrofit would have been less than a conventional retrofit, because you don't need to retrofit the district heating system, which is clearly a huge cost. So even though the energy efficiency is a lot, so already before switching on a light bulb, it would have been cheaper. And we managed to persuade our university to support that and our board to support that. And in the last minute, they decided not to move to the Otto Wagner area, unfortunately. Yes, and we were distinguished by the second best environmental research prize for this research in Austria. So anyway, the point is that yes, retrofit is crucial, and repurposing. Of course, it's a wonderful thing to repurpose an Otto Wagner area, but there are much less sexy repurposes, and I just picked this particular one from the Passive House database from the US. This was there was this health care center for the poor in the US, and they were just in a mobile home, and it was really uncomfortable. So there was this industrial building that was empty, so they repurposed it and retrofitted it with using a lot of already existing equipment, a combination of new and salvaged furnishings, and because they managed to retrofit it such efficiently, they could afford a much lower boiler, a much smaller boiler, so they could afford this retrofit. So this is the kind of retrofit that I think we need. So yes, but this we tend to forget, even we energy experts, we try to focus always on just energy efficiency. But in fact, when we were running our models, it was very shocking that we realized that actually, yes, energy efficiency matters as well, but that today there is not so much big difference anymore in energy efficiency. But there is a big difference in the durability and how long you are using. And actually, it turns out that it makes a much bigger difference in the sustainability of a building, how long you're using even the interiors, the retrofits, the components. So durability is sometimes almost more crucial for sustainability and longevity than energy efficiency. And another thing is that it's also going to be very unpopular with you. But I think we really, in the era of climate crisis, we need to redefine aesthetics or rethink aesthetics. This is beautiful, and glass buildings and fully glazed office towers are wonderful, but simply are not any more appropriate for our present climate. And you know, New York City already prohibited them, and many countries starting to prohibit them. But so we just have to, I know there is so much innovation in architecture, and I'm sure it's possible to find architecture and beauty without actually ruining the environment. So I think we have tremendous responsibility, or you have tremendous responsibility to make this bitter pill for us to swallow in a sweet way. So you can make it beautiful. You can make climate conscious buildings beautiful. And that's really important, because we want beautiful buildings, but we can't do this. And it's not only because it overheats, it has enormous excess air conditioning demand, high embodied carbon dioxide. But this building, and it's very often you see this, giant spaces without a function, which in a climate where you need to both heat and air condition, especially in a commercial building, that's a huge waste of resources. So yes, these are all things that I think we need to rethink when in the climate crisis era, how we are designing buildings. Or, for example, also the interior. And it's a very nice hotel in Berlin, and it's a very typical one. I was just trying to use the stairs rather than the elevators. But it's almost impossible to find the stairs. There is a very nice sign to the toilet, and actually it's in there through that door. But the toilet is very well marked, but where the stairs are absolutely not marked. But the lift is always very much highlighted. So I think the energy efficient, because what we also showed in the sixth assessment report of the IPCC, that yes, individual behavior change is important, but if we all just from tomorrow all behave like really good girls and really good boys and try to do everything as we are told to do, we cannot save more carbon dioxide than 5%. But we could save 70% if there was a systemic change. If these being good girls and good boys wouldn't mean austerity, they wouldn't mean sacrifice, but they would mean comfortable, healthy, attractive choices. And this is so easy as to design a staircase to have a beautiful, like before, you know, in old buildings, you have beautiful staircases which are the center of the building. I know there are fire regulations and so on, but I think you can still, because there are still many good buildings where it's nice to take the stairs and rather having to take the elevator. Is just one example, but it symbolizes that the way you design your real estate really will lock in the behavior of the people and whether they can live in an environmentally conscious way or not. And as I mentioned already, there is no cost excuse, because we showed, and this is also using a lot of industry data, so not in the same article that I showed, not academic data, but a lot of data also from the industry, that, for example, in the same area, passive houses actually cost a little less than conventional buildings. And I showed it also for the retrofit. So yes, it can be done in a cost-effective way. And another thing is that we cannot think about the building alone, but this is really important. And here in this figure, I come back to the Simpson meme at the beginning, how our hottest summer will actually become the coolest. What this shows is, this is from the IPCC report. This shows that the extreme heat events that so far we experienced twice a century. So we call it a 50-year event. So the really hot weather. Towards the end of the century, when we already will have we could easily have 4-degree hotter climate, this is going to occur about 40 times more frequently. That means that which occurred twice a century now is going to occur 80 times. So that means virtually every year we'll have the worst heat waves that we used to have. And each of them will be actually 5 degrees hotter than before. So that tremendous responsibility and opportunity for you, because you are building these buildings now that we will have to endure these heat waves later on, that we will have to survive these heat waves later on. So, and it's the solution, of course, there are many solutions. The solution is not that much air conditioning. Of course, we will need some air conditioning, but it's really important that that we keep whatever cool what we can. And this is just the heat map that I happen to have. It's of the Budapest land surface temperature. It's on an innocent August 31st day. It's not even a very hot day at all. It's not even the hottest hour of the day. Just that's when they did this satellite photo. And you see, and unfortunately, you may not see the scale very much, but actually there is a mind-boggling 30 degrees centigrade difference between the red and the more dark green areas. And even if you look in the center, there are very close areas next to each other which have this 30 degrees centigrade difference. So that means that, yes, climate change is terrible and it will have terrible heat waves, but right now we are heating our cities much more than climate change does. And if we manage to tackle the heat islands, if we manage to get our heat islands out of the cities, we could, at least for urban residents, we could still maintain their thermal comfort for decades without them really noticing the bad heat waves as compared to the before. And what's the trick? Now, the trick is, of course, vegetation. Very, very interesting how the foliage density totally correlates with this surface temperature. So it's not enough to have some lawn, some 3.2 millimeter perfected, manicured golf lawn, but the more foliage, the more leaves. Since leaves are conditioned, because leaves are the ones which evapotranspirate, and with evapotranspiration, every single leaf cools. So it means the more leaf area you have, the cooler your district is going to be. So yes, a tree definitely has a lot of service. We call them ecological services to humanity. And I just wanted to show an example because there are many types of architecture. I really admire this. This actually just happens to be the school of my children where they used to go. And it was in a beautiful plot. And in the middle of the plot, there were these 3 chestnut trees. And the architect, and normally, of course, every Hungarian architect, the first thing, cut the 3 trees, put the school in the middle, and then could cut everything else, and on the side, then we will plant some trees or whatever. No, instead, this architect had the humility to just plan the whole school around these trees. And it provides an amazing service to the students, to the pupils. So it really cools the environment. We are working with nature. It's also capturing carbon by living biomass in soils, because the bigger the tree, the more carbon and it captures, especially in the soil. It's providing a lot of shading and cools by foliage, and also it just improves the well-being and mental health. We know by today that green infrastructure has tremendous contributions to mental health. We know, for example, that in hospitals, in the same ward, rooms next door, the patients whose windows look at trees rather than to infrastructure, those patients get home faster. And there is tremendous scientific statistical evidence for that. And we have many other pieces of evidence. So I just wanted to close with this picture of Barcelona, showing that even in a hot climate, you can actually create a cool environment and very livable city by planting trees, which actually shade the buildings. But the point is that we have to plant the trees which will shade our buildings in the terrible heat waves. We will have 50 degrees centigrade heat waves, no doubt. It's just a question of how soon. We have to plant the trees now, which are going to shade the tree, the windows, the insulated windows. Then, by that time, so it's a tremendous opportunity, because through that we also create much more livable cities. And we all know, I think we all agree that we need change. We all agree also that perhaps someone else could do it. But I'm afraid it will have to be you to lead the change. And I can relieve you from all your zero waste efforts and all your efforts on straws and plastic bags. Nothing will count. All your life's efforts or individual efforts will count. Nothing as compared to even just one building if you let your project be a bit more sustainable. So you have tremendous opportunity, and that's fantastic, and I so much envy you, because I only talk about it and that will not help the world, but you can actually do it. And when you go to bed, you can go to bed comfortable that, God, I really made a big difference. And I mean it. I'm not speaking empty. Because yes, many of you do have children. It's also our lives, but our children. Can we move away from what we are used to? I know glass buildings are beautiful. I know a lot of things that we are used to and we learned are wonderful, but we have to change things. We have to do things differently. I know new buildings, and you have all been in the business of building new buildings, but I'm afraid the Stone Age did not end for the lack of stones. We have to go into another industry a bit and change from new buildings to retrofits. But what I showed that with this, if you are ready to lead this change, we can actually make, not only control climate change, but we can make a healthier world and a more livable cities. So thank you very much for your attention. And yes, it is a tremendous opportunity. Don't take this as a responsibility, take it as an opportunity. Thank you very much for your attention.